and that's a very spiritual colour, that vest.
Thank you. Very red.
But it goes very well with the olive underneath it, doesn't it?
They do actually, one celestial, one spiritual.
Yeah. Oh.
Lord, we lift this offering to you, and we say, this is the day that you have made. Fill us with your love and your wonder and your fellowship, for this is the evidence that we are your disciples, that we love one another.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Ah. Oh, don't sit in.
Not just you can just say the Lord's Prayer.
Right, we will.
The Lord's Prayer.
Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
Thank you. Have a seat. So, I want to launch into a couple of things really quickly, because this is part 2, and last month we looked at building the tower. And that's such an important point, because we had a lot of fun, didn't we, Bill? We went to different towers and we looked at a lot of different things. But the tower that the Lord here was specifically talking about is the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous run into it and are saved. And that really comments strongly. It's part 1, so it comments strongly on what we're about to look at, part 2. But before we go there, I have a passage to read you and a quick analogy to tell you. Happened this morning, and it happens a lot of mornings. Russell, you've been to where we live. You helped us check the house over before we bought it. Our master bedroom at the front, big window to the west, to the east. So that beautiful, cold, wintry sun is coming right up and shining straight in the window, a bit like it does there, but it really comes pouring in through our master bedroom. And then on this side is a little ensuite. So I go in there, and the mirror's facing me as I go in there, and you're looking at the mirror, and I can see nothing. I've got the brightest fluoro light, and I can see nothing because of this sunlight coming in the window. And as soon as I pull the door shut behind me, it's like it magically changes. Pull the door shut, and I can see every detail in my face. Brush your teeth, and you get ready for the day. But not while that sun's coming in. It just interferes with the light in that bathroom. It's like my face is dark and I cannot see anything in the mirror. That's a really good analogy of how we are all at different levels of heavenly light flooding our souls. And sometimes the higher light, it interferes with where we're currently at. So we can't see anything. And that's even why there are 3 very distinct heavens. There's a natural spiritual heaven, there's a spiritual heaven, and then there's a celestial heaven. And the light of each is so different that people in the wrong heavens are blinded or confused by the light. So what does that have to do with today's message? It has a lot to do with how the Lord prepares us for spiritual battles. He won't let us go into a battle until we're first prepared properly. Why even do we have to go through battles, Lord? I mean, please, you're the creator of the universe, really. But you notice even in the Lord's Prayer we said today, lead us, not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So really what we're praying is, Lord, lead us into deliverance from evil. But we are, and the Lord put that other bit in there, not into temptation, because temptation is the wilderness that we must pass through to get into that promised land of being delivered from evil. It's kind of like he's saying, you're going to go through temptation. You're not going to be able to avoid that. But remember always, the goal is the deliverance from evil. So reading this passage here from Secrets of Heaven, it'll throw a little bit more light on that. One of the most incredible passages on temptation. I'm not sure, Juan. 6144. Does it come up in the studies you've been doing? 6144. 6144.
It does.
Secrets
Secrets of Heaven 6144.
Does.
Here it is.
Because the famine overwhelmed them. So remember Joseph went into the land because there was a famine overwhelming. And he got Egypt to put all this grain aside. And then all the nations ended up coming to Egypt because they had so much famine. Because the famine was overwhelming everyone. That's what's being commented on here right now. Because the famine overwhelmed them means because the desolation reached the point of despair. Who's ever got to a point of despair in your spiritual walk? I'm just going to keep my arm up there because I seem to get them fairly regularly. But I've learnt, when I'm in despair, I've actually learned to just go, I'm not going to be fooled by this, you devil. And I just hold on to the Lord. And sure enough, this beautiful peace always comes. It always comes. Okay, so we're talking about this point of despair, desolation or temptation coming to the point of despair. This is clear from the meaning of the famine as desolation, so far as things of the church are concerned, dealt with in these passages. When it is said to overwhelm them, it is despair as seen in 5279. For the final stage of desolation is despair. Oh, why would you bring me into despair, Lord? Why? What are you doing? Well, let's keep reading. Despair is the final stage of desolation and temptation. Interesting. Desolation is where God's getting rid of evil. Temptation is where he's preserving good. So here's someone who's evil, but they've got good in their life. Not for any reason of their own. For them to be congruent, the Lord has to allow that evil the good in them to be lost. That's called desolation. So they become purely evil, because that's what they want. But here's a good person that's got some evil mixed in. So the Lord's got to tempt it, like in fire. Tempt the metal in the fire till the impurities come out. Desolation, temptation. Both of them end up in despair, is what he's saying. And he goes on to say, despair is the final stage of desolation and temptation. For a number of reasons, of which let only the following be advanced here. Through despair, people are led into an effective and perceptible way to acknowledge that nothing true or good comes from themselves. When you're in a moment of utter despair, you go, my tank's empty. I've got nothing left. I'm doomed. But it's also the moment you go, I'm not as amazing as I thought I was. I'm empty. At least the ego's empty anyway, the lower ego. Because the higher ego is Christ in us. So through despair, people are led into an effective and perceptible way of acknowledging that nothing true or good comes from themselves, and to acknowledge that what is from their own has caused them to be damned, but what is from the Lord has aided them and is delivering them from damnation. So it's a separating process. True spiritual enlightenment is happening. It was Thich Nhat who said, the Buddhist teacher who said, or someone like that who said, enlightenment is destruction. Isn't it? Very wise. Enlightenment is destruction because the ego must perish. And then the higher ego comes in and sees from the Lord's perspective. So he goes on to say, they're delivered from damnation, with salvation entering in through what is true and good. Despair also exists to the end that life's bliss, which the Lord imparts, may be felt. So he's getting the blockages out of the way. It's like the silver or the gold that you're burning in the fire. You get the impurities out, and suddenly how beautiful that metal becomes. So despair also exists to the end that life's bliss, which the Lord imparts, may be felt. For when people come out of that state of despair, they are like those who have been condemned to death, but then are freed from prison. Periods of desolation and temptation also serve as a means by which people gain an insight into states contrary to heavenly life. And from them, they are given a perception and insight into the bliss and the happiness of the heavenly life. For a perception and insight into bliss and happiness can come in no other way. Wow. Never miss your water. until you're dry. Or you can't value a mountain unless there's some valley down below creating this beautiful panoramic view. Isn't it? Otherwise you're in a plain. Isn't it?
Mm.
So these low moments that we're going through, the Lord says, don't worry, I'm shifting you to live on the mountain. So when you're in your despair, remember, that's the valley on the way to the top of the mountain. Okay, so lead us, not into temptation, but into deliverance from evil. So then he goes on to say that these contrary states of heavenly life, and though we're given a perception and insight into the bliss and the happiness of heavenly life, or perception and insight into bliss and happiness can come in no other way than from a contrast with their opposites. Therefore, so they can have the one fully demonstrated against the other, periods of desolation and temptation are protracted to the uttermost, to the prodigal moment. Haven't I had enough, Lord? Almost, just a bit more. I'm in despair, just a little bit more. And then suddenly you come through and you experience great peace and great bliss. And I promise you'll never have to go into that valley ever again. There'll be other valleys, but not that one ever again. So periods of desolation and temptation are protracted to the utmost, that is to the point of despair. Wow. So let's now have a look at this parable. Jesus says, what king going to make war against another king? So inside you are kings, called revelations and truths. What king is going to go and make war against another person's idea of how life is meant to be, their idea of what is truth? Unless you first of all sit down, consult whether you're able with 10,000 to meet him that comes against you with 20,000. Or else, while the other is yet far off, he will send an ambassador and desire conditions of peace. So likewise, whosoever he be of you, that forsake not all that he has, he cannot be my disciple. Pretty full on stuff, isn't it? Anything coming up for people?
Oh,
Yeah. Go on, we'll jump in. What's
Okay. First of all, despair means removal of hope. That's the latter.
So that evil can be fully evil.
Oh no, if you were suffering from despair,
right,
you lose the hope that you had.
right,
You are completely and utterly hopeless.
yes,
Now, this is the precondition for the 12 steps of AA to work. You see.
right,
People say, look, I admit that I cannot stop drinking, and that is a fact. And I admit that I absolutely hopeless. I can't even organise my own affairs properly. And the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said, if you can accept both those realities, that's the outer darkness and the inner darkness, you've got a chance of understanding the whole thing. And the whole thing says that when you are totally bereft of hope in yourself, etc., that's then when God can come into you, because you're empty of all that self-rubbish.
In fact, if it's all right to jump in there, Bill, that understanding that you're talking about, when you first start to look at the inner and outer darkness, and you begin to understand, that's the first real step to transcendence.
Yeah.
And this is the way Swedenborg explains it. He says, look, the Lord is building a tower inside you. It's actually a fortress. But here we are, we're looking at the tower. That's what Jesus is saying. And he keeps adding more and more truths to you. Today you're going to have more truths added to you, I hope. And it'll come from each of us and from the Word. So more and more truths are being added to us, and they're like cut wood that we build into a fortress, waiting for the enemy to come. At the right time, the Lord says, let it come. And we begin to fight. So truth builds a fortress, and we begin to fight. What are we really fighting? Our old selfish will. And what's going to replace it is the new heavenly will flowing in. But you've got to have this fight. So first, you build the fortress of truth. Then you have the fight. And then after the fight, truth is no longer truth. It becomes good. Because it marries. Truth and good marry each other. And so we don't have to fight anymore. Because truth has now become good. So this is the process of the battle.
I was listening very carefully there because there's a germ of it. Did anyone see that blurb that I sent called The Hungry Ghosts?
Yes.
Now, this is actually the cause of type 2 diabetes. And I wrote an essay. In 2006, there was this Canadian breakthrough, and there was this awareness of something that I won't go into for the sake of brevity. But if you look currently in China, 1/10, that's 10% of the population have got diabetes. And 50%, 1/2 of the entire population of China is pre-diabetes. That's what we call glucose intolerant, insulin resistance. Glucose intolerance? No, it's the precondition before type 2 diabetes. Right. And I've shown that this is what happens after famines. And China was, of the 10 worst famines in the 20th century, China was exposed to 4 of them.
Wow.
Now, so what is that? I am convinced the spirits or the hungry ghosts in Singapore that they celebrate in Singapore this month, on the 15th of this month is Hungry Ghost Festival Day. But this is the Hungry Ghost month. But this is a thing that they're sort of revering, and I really applaud. I think Chinese culture is very, very smart, and they're very wise to do this. As Christians, we would use a different sort of method of doing it. But what I believe is happening is that the spirits of people who starve to death, and when you starve to death, it's not just one person here, it's whole communities die, and there's no one left to pray for you, because all your relatives, they're all gone as well. And it's a terribly, terribly sad thing. And these people absolutely perished in utter despair. Now, I believe that their spirits, they're giving us this dim message. This is what it's like to starve to death. And it's misinterpreted by the unconscious mind in certain people, including me, says, you're starving to death, mate. If you just imagine what happens if your unconscious mind thinks you're starving to death and then you eat a hearty meal, you end up with a whole lot of things happening that's diabetes. And now, so I'm listening very carefully to what Swedenborg had to say there. And there's something that, because these people despaired, they had absolutely no hope left, and then they died, and it's a terrible way to die. And it's as though their spirits are sort of somehow more available to us because they died in despair. Now, I'm just thinking this through as I was listening very carefully to what Swedenborg was saying. But I'm sure that this is the thing. Now, I'm currently, I'll just bash your ears for another 5 minutes. I went to a neurologist yesterday who confirmed that I've got the early signs of Parkinson's disease. Now, one of the things that's been shown to stop it is a diabetic drug called exenatide. And I've been on this for a month. And my Parkinson's symptoms are definitely less than when I started. And he's got another patient who's had relief from Parkinson's with this drug. This drug is a very interesting thing because, as my specialist said, what it does, it fools your brain into thinking you've just had a big meal. Now, here's my unconscious mind that for some reason has been picking up starvation. Actually, my uncle who died as a prisoner of war in Japan, he starved for quite a long time. And I don't know whether that's something to do with his spirit, or whether I'm just one of these sensitive people that's picking up all the souls of people all over the world. But my unconscious mind says, hey, listen, mate, we're starving to death. Don't bother putting out any insulin or anything. But this exenotide says, no, you're not. You just had a big fat meal, mate. It somehow seems to be fixing it. We might have found the answer, but there's something about Parkinson's disease where there's cells in the brainstem, the dopamine cells, they just commit suicide. There's not any bugs eating them. And it's as though they've got the message that someone has to die so that others may live. And this drug is telling those cells, hey, listen, you don't have to sacrifice yourself. We're doing okay. Now, there's some mystery about how this thing works, but I can feel this thing operating. But there's this connection between experiencing real despair, just as you said, and the Lord then being, well, you've got no hope other than God. Because you've abandoned hope in yourself or the government or anything, you don't have any hope, and therefore you are one of God's beloved children who's got nothing other than to say. And I think you don't even have to ask, because you're beyond asking, because you say there's no hope. God's abandoned me. What's the use of saying the Lord's Prayer or anything like that? You know, I'm just going to. I think that despair provides sort of wide opening. So
there's another thing that we can look at too. Not saying what you said is fantastic. I've got to really think about that.
Yeah, I'm going to think about it.
There's this principle in the spirit too, where the Lord never wants to harm us. So while our ego is believing that it is self-sufficient and life itself, it's blocking more influx. The Lord set that up so that we don't hurt ourselves. But when we get to the despair and we go, I've been to the bottom where I know I've got nothing. So when I've got something, it's not me, it's flowing in. And that realization, that perception, that awareness that life is flowing in allows more life to flow in, and I'm not blocking it.
It's incredible stuff, isn't it? That what Bill was talking about, and what we're talking about here is just really where I've been at, like that compartmentalising of my life, where I have these clear compartments, and they're kind of like little tight compartments that I transit from one to the next, and life becomes it has been difficult. And then, there's the work life, and then there's this, but within myself, there's these big compartments as well. And but Paul talks about, he says, "Wretched man am I," and then he goes on to say, and then later on he's in a jail, and he's let out by angels. And I just think that it must be metaphorical or something like that. Like, I don't know the whole story, and I don't know how it links all together biblically, but I do. That's been coming up for me. I remember I lived at Yeronga once, and I was laying in my bedroom in a fetal position. My wife was dying in the other room, and I'm there in a fetal position thinking, why me? And the self-centeredness was there, and the surrender. But not knowing what surrendering for, not even believe, praying to a God that you don't know,
and going. You love that which you don't understand.
Well, yeah, and how do you? But then somehow, all these years later, 2 suburbs away, sitting in a chair, going, yes, that's what I went through. Exactly what you're talking about. That's exactly what we go. What happens in our lives. And
wow.
Incredible, eh? What a journey, and with the grace of God, how the grace of God enters into this. There's nothing that I did. It was, they talk about unmerited. My whole thing was, why me?
Yeah.
And then, okay, well, I've got to, it's the human thing to do. The best thing to do is to help her. And that's what I have to do. So I have to, one day, a step at a time, continue to help, continue to do what I can. But, I don't have it. I don't really have it, I mean. But the Lord delivers us. The Lord delivers us. Yeah.
Do you want to read that?
Oh,
No, it's good.
not a good reader.
That's okay.
Which part?
Part 1.
Part 2.
Yeah.
Part 2. Spiritual battles are unavoidable if there is to be any spiritual progress. Firstly, the hells and evil spirits inhabiting those hells hate all humans. They hate all who do not venerate them. They hate even more those who venerate the Lord, and mostly they hate the Lord above all others. Their hatred is derived from the reality that the Lord's kingdom is built upon all and everyone placing the needs of others first and above their own needs. We all, when within a spiritual society, are governed by this simple rule. Bliss and life can flow freely towards everyone in every ever-increasing volume. The selfish soul, though, is like a black hole that absorbs all light and heat in its path. Such a soul cannot nor will not give anything in return. When evil spirits enter a heavenly atmosphere, the free-flowing bliss and life terminates in times and causes terrible auroras of disruption.
That should be auras.
Auras of disruption. It is for this reason that the Lord qualifies here in this parable that all who will follow him must embrace the spiritual practice of forsaking all, that is self-organizing, self-originating, or self-in origin, or selfish origin, in origin.
So does that make sense, that paragraph?
Oh, yeah.
That idea that heaven's economy is trust. Think about yourself, trust the Lord for yourself, and really just get involved in sowing the happiness of others, because everybody does that. That's the economy of that place. And everything flows back in its own time, in its own way. And you can let go. It's the utopia that every government on earth wants, except when they try to make it happen, it's usually done with a gun or a fiscal threat. It's never...
The utopia that every government on earth thinks it wants.
Thinks it wants.
Because then it realises that it has to give up power, it doesn't.
That's right. Everyone can give up their power but me.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
Everyone can give up their power to me.
To me, I like that. That's good.
That's the one they think they want.
Isn't it fascinating, though, that everybody wants this? Every government on earth wants some sort of utopia. It's just...
Every person does, but they want it their way.
They want it... Yes. There's a struggle, isn't there, Darren? There's a struggle between wanting utopia and wanting it my way. Yeah, that's very well said. Any other thoughts on that before I'll get Ken to read the next bit?
I just found the hatred and so on fairly strong, but then on the other hand, it reminded me of what the Lord said in the Sermon on the Mount about being angry with your brother. And people, if you read that, you wonder why he was listy to say even a bad word, he says, or to curse your brother. And you think to yourself, really? But when you stop and think about it, he was saying anger is very destructive because at the heart of it is the desire to blot out that other person or that we don't like being told that, but anger does have that in it, which is a
Domination.
You're just a waste of space and time. That's really what anger is saying. As I said, we don't like being told that, but it's the truth. And that's what the Lord said.
And although it is tough, the whole hatred,
Yeah, it is hatred.
and it's a tough reality,
It is tough, I mean.
but it's these contrasts again, isn't it? The blissful life versus the selfish life, the black hole selfish life. But the reason evil spirits hate the Lord so much is because it's not the Lord, but the Lord's light exposes what they're in.
Good point.
Paul said it this way: to those who are being saved, we, the apostles, are the aroma of life. To those who are perishing, we are the stench of death.
Oh, yes.
And what he meant was, when the apostles came forth with the spirit of light, that light suddenly showed them, what's that smell? Get away from me, you terrible apostle, you stink. And it's like, it was their own death they were smelling. So it was their own death they were smelling. And they were blaming the apostles, go away. When you're not here, everything's wonderful, go away. So there's this idea, when the Lord comes and challenges selfishness, selfishness says, go away, I don't want that. And that's why hell is...
You know, when you just starting off to speak this morning, talking about the light plumbing.
The light in the bathroom, yeah.
Well, I was, recalling Swedenborg stuff about these, about the evil spirits, bad people. They can't stand that heavenly light. They've got to go and get into where it's dimmer. And to them, the light of heaven is darkness to them.
Yes, yes.
Now, here's these spirits of people who have been so self-centered. They're trying to look at themselves in the mirror and love themselves and that sort of thing, but they can't because there's heavenly light coming in the window.
Yes.
They can't see a thing. So they got to get out of the light. They got to shut that bathroom door so they can look at themselves and admire themselves.
Bill, I'm thinking this while I'm doing this. I opened and shut the door several times because I was so fascinated at how bright. I'd shut that beautiful bright sunlight and I was like, I can't believe how light it is in here, which is a fluoro light, and I could see every detail. Yeah. As soon as I open and look again, it's pitch black. I can't see a thing.
But
it's funny the difference.
According to Swedenborg, these people, they can't stand that light, and they can't stand the angels are too nice, and so they
can't focus on themselves in that light.
They end up knocking around to finding some of these other people under a tree, and they go and they go in a cave where they can. And of course, then they treat each other the way that they normally do, and fight over someone's seat and punch each other around the ears and all this sort of stuff. But they can't. That heavenly light is darkness to them.
Yeah.
That's what Swedenborg actually
It
said.
stops them from being able to focus on themselves.
And
I hate that.
When I sing, I think probably I better not say that to Darren.
That's all right.
That he had to shut the door to see himself.
I know. But to me, it was the lesser light and the higher light. And sometimes, even last week, month when we were talking about towers, you were seeing some really good stuff there, Bill.
Yeah.
But it just probably wasn't what we were wanting to focus on at the time, but it was like very valid revelations.
Right.
And I think, the Lord allows us to have our light. He doesn't want to take that from us because you can't step up into the higher light until you first work with the light you've got.
Ooh, true.
And then when you've done that work, you can then adjust. I mean, nobody wants... Have you ever had your wife or husband come and pull the curtain and you're asleep? Nobody wants turn the light off. Nobody wants that.
So you're saying that it's okay to be where you're at?
Yes.
So we've got to become comfortable with that.
Or looking to go further, because when you're comfortable with where you're at, you can just do the process. You can sit down and you can consult. Am I ready to take that light on? Because if I go into that brighter light, I could destroy myself. I need to be ready for that. That's what the whole message today is about. So keep reading.
Too early.
Yeah. So we'll get there. It's a really good question.
Can I just add something in there?
Yeah.
It kind of touches for me on, or a way I can assimilate with that, is quite often I'll be trying to figure something out, whether it's a relationship or my understanding of something or something like that. And by that passage, a big part of what that passage is saying to me is the two great commandments.
Yes.
And that's what life is all about. Now, when I'm trying to understand something, I'll start reading it. I might read some of the Bible or read some Swedenborg stuff or read other things, trying to get a perception. But I know if I think firstly of those two great commandments, it puts me in a place where I can kind of understand a bit better. But I don't always want to be in that place, and I want to let my mind work and think about this and think about that.
Yes.
And I don't get that same vision when I do that. But I can't stay in that light of loving the Lord, loving the neighbour the way that I feel deep inside that I should, because my mind wants to work and it doesn't work in that same light.
We don't always know what's going on under the deeper layers, Darren. For example, fear could be there.
Absolutely.
Why did Abram go to the king of Egypt and say, "This is my sister"? He was afraid that if he found out it was his wife, he'd kill him and take her. And the spiritual meaning there, even the Lord, when he was a little baby, was realizing that sometimes loving knowledge for knowledge's sake can be very attractive, feels good, feels self-empowering, feels delightful. That's the sister. And we don't want to let that go and let Abram marry Sarah again, be married. You know, truth belongs to good and good belongs to truth. You know, Egypt, the king of Egypt wants to own her. She's so beautiful. So sometimes, even, and I love what you said there about go back to love the Lord and love the neighbour, and you'll figure it out often. But sometimes there's stuff deep down us that we're not aware of. We're not prepared for what's going to happen when we do that. Fear that things that come up. Yeah. Thank you. That was fantastic.
So to me, it's just a personal way I can relate to what we're talking about.
Yeah. And we've all got to do that. I love that, Darren. Thank you. We've all got to try to get some kind of personal take out of this.
Darren, are you making an analogy to you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and strength, etc., as this bright light, and you're trying to work on some other things, and if you're just thinking about that all the time, you've got to actually just get past that and think about other things. Are you? Because that's what I'm as well as what you're saying. I'm getting that with Darren number 2 over there.
D1 and D2.
with the brick, with the bright light. Actually, this has got a lot more applications than it looks like.
They
Anyway,
always do,
I'm
Bill.
going to think about what you were
do.
saying.
Because in a sense, if I think about that, thinking about loving the Lord
Yeah.
with all your mind, with all your heart, with all your soul, and loving your neighbour as yourself, if I just meditate, I feel like I could float away. You know what I mean? You almost feel like you can. But I can't put that into words and practice, and I've got to come out of that light into a light that I can work with, and that's a heck of a lot lower than where that feeling wants to take me.
Nice. Nice.
Because my mind can't bring that in. So once I get down into that nuts and bolts part where I'm working with my hands, if you like, I can easily then be distracted into what makes my ego feel good instead of what connects with that feeling that I'm trying to connect back to. So it's a kind of a winding road.
This is right. This is right. We're onto something here, fellas.
Of course we are. Read that second paragraph.
All right. Secondly, spiritual progress is incredibly variegated and cyclic. The advanced soul understands the need to work on those areas, battles, that the Lord has moved into one's consciousness, and to those moments where the consciousness is activated. All the other areas are best left to providence and the leading of the Lord in terms of timing involved in confronting and dealing with those states.
So I'll quickly say something there. When you've got such a wealth of knowledge like the writing, now I'm not trying to emphasise Swedenborg. Swedenborg is no better than any other one of you here. And if he was in this room right now, I'd be happy to spend time with you or him. It's irrelevant to me. It's the message of the Lord that's important. But Swedenborg was asked, his mind and heart was filled, and he was asked to write these things down. So there they are, written down. Now, we can drown ourselves in that stuff. Or we can just take off, bite off enough to chew. And just work on that next little bit and leave it to providence that the Lord will bring us into whatever's needed. Trust me, evil spirits are so good at throwing everything at you. And the Lord's just saying, I just want you to focus over here and work on this little thing. And they're throwing everything at you. And you just got to shut them off and just work on whatever it is the Lord's showing you to work on. And that's an important point there. So right now, you've got to sit down and say, this particular battle, how much have I got? 10,000 men. All right. How many's he got? 20,000. Can we do this, Ken? Can we do this, Bill? Darren, I think we're on to something here. All right, let's do it. Okay. Why do you say that? Because of this, this, and this. Right, I think we can do this. So that's that, just focusing in, and that's the sitting down. Let's go there. Let's have a look at this. Start to break this parable down a bit now. So, Bill, would you mind reading for us?
Where are we?
What king?
What king going to make war against another king That's truth ruling in the mind of the advancing soul, seeking to remove more false belief systems.
Okay, so you've got things in you that you've held on to as truth. And you're now suddenly finding, because you've got a new king in your life, and that wasn't true. I was holding on to that idea for a long time. I need to get that out of me. And it could be as simple as a truth that I'm better than you, or a truth, it's not a truth, but that was your truth, or I'm no good and everybody's better than me, and that was your truth. And suddenly you've come to the Lord and you found the Lord really loves you and the Lord really loves me, and I need to get that belief system out that's been haunting my life, that I'm superior or that I'm no good. I'm just using those as examples. So keep going there, Bill. Read the next one.
Going to make war. That's the advancing soul fighting from a position of truth and revelation. War symbolises spiritual war, which is a war of falsity against truth and of truth against falsity. To make war, therefore, symbolically means to attack. Apocalypse Reveal 586.
Keep going.
One of the greatest mistakes made by those on a spiritual path is passivity. It makes senses, although untrue, that a soul would seek to follow.
That should be makes sense.
It makes sense, although untrue, that a soul would seek to follow the divine through a form of submission and surrender, which in reality is a form of blind acceptance. However, this is exactly the opposite of true spiritual activity. There are times where the advancing soul needs to withdraw and become passive. Quote, "Be still and know that I am God." However, these times or moments are revealed to the advancing soul by the Lord's special leading. In other words, we are called to act and to go into all the world until we receive a counter order from the Lord telling us to sit this one out. It's important for an advancing soul to continue in the last leading, being sensitive to new instructions until shown otherwise.
That makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense to me. Because when I was 71, I said to the boss, that's Jesus, my boss, am I supposed to retire and go and do something else? And he's usually fairly brusque. He's not nasty. He says, I want you to look after my people, and I want you to keep doing it until I tell you to stop.
Yes.
So he hasn't told me to stop yet.
Hope he never does.
But the interesting thing is he didn't say my people. He said my people, and his people, I believe, are the people that he was referring to in the Sermon on the Mount. How fortunate are those who haven't got tickets on themselves? And since that time, just about everyone I see, they're Christians who've been really dealt a very bad hand. But they're all believers, and they're all people that I see are people who don't have tickets on themselves. Because all those other very clever, smart Alex, they're too clever to admit that they need any help or anything, and they certainly wouldn't ask God for help. So this makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know whether to anybody else.
Well, again, temptation tests temptation, spiritual battles will do that to us. They bring us to the point where whatever tickets we had on ourselves burn up pretty quick. They burn up, and we realise we've got no tickets on ourselves. But what is important here is that when your soul is active by nature, I know that's a little bit different to the Buddhist idea. The Buddhist idea is to try and become inactive. And I think that's probably the one area where Buddhism and I suppose the spiritual movement differ, and that we have something encouraging to offer there, is that the soul is active by nature. And so you can't just sit and be still. They say an empty mind, devil's workshop, because the chatter will go on and on and on and on and on and on.
It's also an empty larder, isn't it? An empty, sitting still. It's okay if other people are out selling the rice and doing the stuff while you sit there and look at the navel. But doesn't get you anywhere, really.
No. We need periods of stopping and saying, what do you say, Lord?
Yeah.
What do you say, Lord? And we need to do that. But then we need to be faithful to just act on what we know. And there's such an important, I've heard Ian say this many times over the years, there's such an important reason why. And that's because influx, that's the divine power of heaven flowing into the soul. Influx follows action, not the other way around. You know, we've all seen or emptied a fish tank with a hose, haven't we?
Yeah.
We've seen it. You can put the hose there and go, why isn't it working? At some point you need to pull on the liquid, put a demand, get it flowing, and once it's flowing you can sit back and go, wow, look at that. And this is the same with the things of the Spirit. You know, the Bible says, stir up the things of God. Don't act as though it's yourself, while acknowledging that it's actually the Lord. And then when it's flowing, don't take credit, just go, thank you, Lord, that's flowing in my life. Just keep acknowledging the Lord. But you've got to be active, and too often people will sit back here and say, I had this guy, he literally said to me, I'm just waiting. I said, what are you waiting for? I'm waiting for the Lord. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, I don't know, Darren, I'm waiting for a phone call. From who? Anyone. Just, I'm waiting for that phone call. And what are they going to say? Come and minister here, and come and do this, and come and... I said, you're waiting for someone to ring you and say, I said, just go. That's what the Lord told us to do. Just go.
Which reminds me of Ahab. The prophet was talking to Ahab about a battle, about an enemy. And Ahab must have got cold feet and said, well, who's going to begin the battle? The prophet turned to him, you are.
Oh,
you are.
yes.
And off he went. But he hanging around there, getting the jitters about it, and the prophet said, get out there.
Yes. Awesome. So let's have a look at what the sitting down bit is. I think the sitting down, we're sitting down right now, and I mean that in many more ways than just literally we're sitting on a chair. We have come here today to do this part of the parable. Sit down and say, Lord, I'm ready. I read with Darren 6144 where it says that, you know, there's no other way to know the heavenly light than to be brought through contrary states. And there's no other way for me to truly acknowledge you as the source than to be brought to a moment of complete emptiness and despair. Exinonation, as we will call it. The Lord himself went through states of being glorified and being completely and utterly emptied. Garden of Gethsemane stuff, sweating blood, being emptied. Okay, so dig in. Russell, do you want to read for us where we're up to? Page 2.
We turned over the page.
Yeah, we got there.
Sitteth not down first and consulteth whether he be able. The advancing soul in a state of peace, inquiring from the Lord where energy and attention must go, choosing a suitable high calling. To be seated here speaks of a willingness to lay down one's own goals and ambitions while seeking spiritual guidance from the Lord. Except the Lord build the house, they labour in vain that built it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. The Lord also draws an earthly wisdom here, for no sane person would undertake a building project without first examining their own resources and funding. We too should adequately prepare ourselves, especially our mental attitude, for the struggles and effort required to overcome selfish states through spiritual battles.
I think it was John last month who quoted that very verse, and I said, I think it's in the study. No, it's in next month, because I'd already written that.
You know, the Aboriginal people have used to sit us down exactly the same as this. They want people to come up, they say, you've got to sit down, because when you sit down, you talk. You don't talk while you're standing up, you've got to sit down while you're... Yeah, that's interesting, because exactly what king sitteth not down first and talks.
So do Africans. They're of course caught up in Western hurry when you get to the cities, but if you go off out of the cities, you see little clusters of people sitting under the shades of trees. We might think, well, that's lazy, or why don't they get up and mend the fence or something? The fence is not important. But sitting there talking and plotting which way to go or how to deal with the situation is much more important to them. And there's a lesson that has been a lesson for me being in Africa. You know, I stayed with Africans and I look around and I think, why don't you mend the bathroom tap? Or the handle's coming off that door there. They're not interested in the handle coming off the door, nor are they interested in the fact that the tap doesn't work. It's not important, but communication and sitting down and thinking through what next needs to do. And that may take all afternoon, but that's their way society, that's the way their society works. We rush around in our Western society to our detriment.
And Aboriginal people will sit down and talk until they all agree. And because it's no use having 70%
No, that's right.
doing something, because the other 30% will feel frustrated and resentful. They'll destroy the whole thing. So unless you get 100%
Unity.
if you forget it, you've got to have another go at it.
That's a good Swedenborgian principle, Bill, because the term we use, or the term that's been coined, within, I struggle with this with the word, but with this essential unanimity.
Yes.
Not voting, but essential unanimity. One of the wise, now well truly passed on New Church ministers in America coined that phrase many, many years ago. And made a big impression on me, like your collective conscious at AA, Kevin, and things like that, where you get people moving towards a single viewpoint so that others don't feel cheated or not heard. That sort of thing. Essential unanimity is what we aim for, not voting.
Right.
Exactly. Each one of these parables has incredible depth. You know, we were talking, Guan, we did a parable a few months ago about the fig tree that wouldn't bear fruit.
Yeah.
And then Guan just says, so when people are talking and sharing, Christians are, particularly, you know, New Church people are sharing ideas, they're cross-pollinating. And I went, yes, I like it, they're cross-pollinating. Because the tree needs the birds to come and land on its flower and then go to another one and land on its flower and go on its flower and go on cross-pollinating. And this is what's happening here this morning. Now, we're getting greater light, but it's not offensive. It's gradually getting brighter because we're cross-pollinating each other. And we're, you know, sharing those ideas. Vivian, what do you think? Cross-pollinate us. What do you think?
Really talk, I got
That's all
really
right. Sorry.
try as well.
Sorry.
So before we leave the subject
Yes.
of despair,
Despair, yes.
I just wanted to say that I think it's vital that we have community, because within a community or people we trust, we should be able to say to them, that's temptation, or your despair, you know, is part of the process. It's not you hit a roadblock and you're going to stay there. I visited a 97-year-old lady yesterday afternoon, and she was much sicker than I thought. And I'd spoken to her on the phone a couple of weeks ago, and she just made the comment, "Oh, you can live too long, Ian." And I thought, yeah, that's okay. I know she's been thinking that for a couple of years. But yesterday, she was fighting it, and yet, in fact, I think all the indications are that she's begun her journey, because she wasn't able to get up out of it. She was actually being nursed and had the oxygen machine and so on. And she said, "Oh, just another 2 years." And I thought, no, you're into this battle. There's a battle going on here, and it's temptation.
Yeah.
even right at the end, it's a temptation that she's going through.
Letting
Do
go.
I trust what's going to happen? And all this kind of thing. Sorry to diagnose,
No,
but I just
that's-
wanted to say that despair, I know it's been helpful myself, and somebody said to me, look, this is a spiritual process that's going on, and it's not the end, it's not the roadblock you might think it is. So
I'm glad you said it, Ian, because what you said there, you've really captured and encapsulated a lot of what the parable's trying to say to us. It's trying to say to us, take time, like we're doing, to reflect on these processes so that the thief in the night, the Lord coming, he's not coming as a thief in the night. You are not those, it says in the epistles, you are not those who are asleep. And the drunkards get drunk at night, but you are those who are of the light. So the Lord will not come to you as a thief in the night. And what it's saying is that temptation tests come and we go, I know what this is. I feel miserable, I'm in despair, but I know what this is. I feel absolutely lost, but I have hope that deep down I have hope that you're not letting go of me, Lord. And sure enough, you come the other side and you feel this peace.
But I sometimes need somebody else to tell me that.
That's why we sit down and consult. Consulting's not it's not a meditation.
Yeah.
It's, what does it say in the Bible? In the multitude of counsel, there is wisdom. It doesn't say that wisdom is the multitude, but as different things bounce across the room, someone gets something, and then someone else gets something, and it might be say that Bill says something, and then Juan says something, and Bev finally says something, and Ken goes, loved it when Bev said that, I really got it then. So that's that process that we need to engage in. You're making me drool when you talk about these Africans sitting under trees. I love that.
It's the same. The same though, we judge them by Western standards, so we think they're lazy and indolent and
They got it right and we're foolish.
Exactly. What did you think of you over times of despair?
Times of despair, I feel like I'm going through times of despair now in recent times. Yeah, I feel like I'm right down low, but I'm still feeling pretty confident, really, deep down.
Deep down.
So I know I've just got to go with it and don't try and fight it. Just go with it, and just do my best to be in touch with the divine, really.
Beautiful.
And keep it there, because I find it hard at times when there's a lot of sort of worldly things that are coming in and bombarding me. But I've been through it heaps of times before, and I know everyone goes through it. So just when you're going through a heavy period, it's hard. But it comes good after a little while.
And this is a little bit of the washing each other's feet that the Lord talked about.
Ian, there were two things I sort of got out of what you were saying. First of all, it's been said that you'll be tempted by the enemy, by evil, right up to the very moment when you draw your last breath. And secondly, when you see people who don't believe in anything are dying, right at that, when the absolute despair, that when there's nothing left. Now, who's Steve Jobs? As he was dying, and he reckoned he didn't believe in anything, and he said, wow.
Yeah, that's right.
And there was I'll just quickly say, I was at a seminar, and there was a registered nurse from what used to be called Mount Olivet, which is now St Vincent's, and there was a school teacher dying of cancer of the pancreas, and an old mate of his used to come in once a week and sit there, and every time this bloke got up and walked past the nurse's station, he'd give him a serve. You call this a Christian hospital? There's a man in there, he's in terrible pain. You could just give him a dose of something, but no, you just want to prolong his yak. Anyway, he happened to be there when the man died. And he walked out with this shocked look on his face, white, and he just walked straight past the nurse's station, and they said, thank God we missed out on the serve today. Anyway, he came back a week later with a big bunch of flowers for the girls, and he said, look, I want to apologise said, I was sitting in there with my friend, and all of a sudden he looked down to the end of the bed, and he put up his hands like that, and his eyes were full of wonder and excitement, and he leaned forwards and then dropped back down. And he said, I don't know what he saw, but it was just marvellous. And he said, I was just thinking, what if I'd succeeded in talking somebody into sort of euthanizing him earlier on?
Yes.
That may not have happened.
Exactly.
And
very,
he said,
very much so.
And he said, look, I apologise from the depth of my heart, and etc. So it's often right at the very end, when there's no hope, that there's a patient of mine, she was up, she and her husband, and he was talking to two angels down the end of the bed. Of course, that's probably Swedenborg's two celestial angels that were. But there was this conversation, like it was like watching tennis, boom, 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 boom. But it was right at the end, and it's often people who don't have any religious beliefs that right at this very end, something breaks through, which is just what you were saying about despair before. So thanks for your input there, sir.
Bev, you're going to say?
I want to go back to Bill's analogy of despair being starvation, and knowing prisoners of war and other people that are at that stage, they can't take a full meal. They've got to gradually introduce very light food, liquid food. I can remember, I don't know whether it was an ad for Vegemite, but that was one of the meals that they would give them, a meal as such, but food, that it was Vegemite in hot water, make a soup of it. So you gradually build up. And I think that despair is exactly a similar journey coming out. You can't immediately jump out and have a full meal and be satisfied. It's a gradual, little by little, come out of it.
On that subject, Bev, read us the next bit. That was really good.
10,000 are we up to?
Yes,
10,000 states of good and truth stored up and ready to be released in a time of battle or need. And rulers of tens means first and foremost truths in third place. This is clear from the meaning of rulers as first and foremost truths, as above, and from the meaning of tens also as much or many, but in a smaller degree since they come below hundreds. The correspondence of numbers, I should explain that bit further. 20,000 truths or their opposite. In this context, falsities, for they come to fight against the 10,000. Sendeth an ambassage, ideas and concepts that seek for harmony inside the mind of the advancing soul. The mind is created by the Lord to be unified collaboration of truth and goodness, ideas and affections, thoughts and desires. Unity of the mind is is so significant that by the time we have ascended into the afterlife, the unstoppable process of unification will have begun and will continue until completion. I thought it was limitless, actually.
Yes, but
this process of unification is the reason why separate realms exist, known as the heavens and the hells.
It's what I mean by completion there, Bev. We'll go on for eternity,
yeah.
But there won't be, you won't be continually plagued by falsity and evil if you're in heaven, nor will you be plagued by truth and good if you're in hell. They will be removed so that you can expand into the fullness of that process. I think it'll make sense in the paragraph below. Rita, go ahead.
People do not get into hell until they are immersed in their malice and in the falsities that stem from it, because no one is allowed to have a divided mind. To think and say one thing and intend something else every evil person there must think what is false out of malice, and talk out of that malice falsity there, both from intent and therefore from his or her own love and pleasure and gratification. This is how they behaved in the world when they were thinking in their spirit, that is, when they were thinking within themselves from their deeper affection. This is because intent is the essential person, not thought except as it is derived from intent. And volition is volition
Or
is
will.
the essential nature or character of the human being. So being reminded to our own intentions is being reminded to our own nature or character and to our own life as well, since it is through life that we acquire our nature.
Now, I'll get you to keep reading in a minute, but I just want to say, so the Lord has created our mind to be unified. Even in hell, the mind must be unified. It must unify falsity and evil. They will always go together. And in heaven, truth and good, they always go together. So we can't, that's what the world of spirits really is for. When we die and we go to the airport or the world of spirits, we begin the process of removing out of us whatever is obstructing us from being one mind. But on earth, not so. On earth, I could be thinking something deep in my spirit, and with my mouth, I could be saying, oh, well, yeah, you're just such a wonderful bloke, I hope I get the promotion. Yeah, you're the best boss I've ever had. What a bugger. What a horrible bloke, hope he gets sacked. No, sorry. But you know what I'm saying? That this is how people act in this world. They think and say one thing in the external mind, but they're thinking in something differently in the internal mind. That cannot happen.
Well, we like to say that to him because I'd get the sack.
Yeah, exactly. That can't happen in the spirit. Once you're in the spirit, you must be one. You can't have an external and internal that are contradictory.
Transparent.
And we see evidence of it in psychology. Do you want to read on, Bev, there?
Yeah, where am I to?
Modern psychology.
Modern psychologists have identified two significant functions of the mind, called confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance. Confirmation bias occurs when our mind accepts information or potential data that supports our current theories and ideologies around life. Confirmation bias equally causes us to reject information or data that opposes our current worldview and belief systems.
Stop there for a sec. Are we getting what's happening there? Our mind, I could give you the best information on the planet, scientifically and everything. If it goes against your worldview, your mind is designed to reject it. And you will come up with all sorts of reasons why I am wrong, no matter how good the data is. And that's just how our mind is made. And so that's confirmation bias. We are biased towards information that's confirming what I want. Of course, if you're an angel, that's a good thing to have. That's, you'll go seeking out the truth. You'll ask, seek, and knock till you find the truth. Okay, keep going there, Ben.
With cognitive dissonance, our mind displays a tendency to seek out consistency in cognitions or belief systems.
Right.
When inconsistencies occur between attitudes and or behaviours, the mind will bring about change to eliminate the dissonance.
A lot of our midlife crisis, a lot of our issues we're going through, saying I had a breakdown, what's really happening there is actually probably quite a healthy process where that person was stuck in some form of dissonance, cognitive dissonance. They were kind of contradicting themselves, and there needed to be a resolution to get that dissonance out.
Give an example of that.
Yep.
There was this bloke bought this Russian larder. You ever seen one of those
Yes, I
things?
have.
Yeah, anyway, it was such a bomb
They all were.
that I don't know how long he'd had it, not very long, but he just lifted the boot and one of the hinges busted. And now he couldn't admit that he'd wasted all this money on this lemon. He said that's the best car he's ever had. Now, it was the best car he'd ever had, but he had to replace this, that, and the other, and couldn't get parts. It was an absolute lemon. And poor man. But he had this cognitive dissonance. He couldn't admit that he'd made such a mistake. But, he reckoned it was marvellous. It was a marvellous case.
I just said also, Bill, that I listened to a program called God Forbid on ABC, Radio National, 6 o'clock on Sunday mornings. And it's hosted by Paul Carlton. He's outstanding. How he keeps abreast of all these PhDs and all the rest of it. But those two words this morning, his subject was attitudes within different faith systems to each other.
Oh, yes. There you go.
And there was confirmation bias.
Yes, a lot of that.
Strongly.
Yes.
And there was what is it called? Cognitive dissonance. And if you get a chance to listen to it, the cognitive dissonance came from a well-spoken Jesuit Roman Catholic priest. He really was. I could read from the same page as him, as he was saying, I always am open to learning what I'm not seeing myself, but there are others who are into the bias. They're not interested.
With confirmation bias, a good example. Just try to get a conversation about if you're like I am, a supporter of Donald Trump. Just see how many people in Australia. You might get about 2 people in 10 that might be...
Don't walk around with a MAGA hat on. Make America great again, a MAGA. Don't walk around with a MAGA hat.
I know what a MAGA hat is.
Yeah. Just in case anyone else. Yeah, look, it's fascinating to see how we do this to ourselves. I often remind myself, whatever I'm holding on to, it's apparent truth. Compared to what the Lord is going to reveal to me in the future,
yes.
I'm only holding on to apparent truth. That's my bathroom light when I shut the door. Absolutely. It's apparent truth. Okay? It didn't come from the sun.
Exactly.
It's an artificial light, and it's getting me through today. And that's okay.
That's right.
But I'm happy to let go of it, Lord. Just help me let go of it. Yeah. Okay, we'll go on, Ian. Do you want to read a little bit more? We're almost down at the bottom.
Darren.
We'll go to Darren.
Where are we? Desirous conditions, is that?
Yes, peace, yes.
Desirous conditions of peace. Longing for the Lord's kingdom coming from remnants deep within the soul. Peace is like dawn on the earth, which gladdens minds with universal delight, and the truth of peace is like the light of the dawn. This truth, which is called the truth of peace, is the very divine truth in heaven from the Lord, which universally affects all who are there, and makes heaven to be heaven. For peace has in it confidence in the Lord, that he directs all things and provides all things, and that he leads to a good end. When a man is in this state, he is in peace, for he then fears nothing, and no solicitude about things to come disquiets him. A man comes into this state in proportion as he comes into love to the Lord. From Secrets of Heaven, 8:4-5.
One of my favourite passages ever. Thoughts on that? The peace of heaven? It's beautiful. Yes, we've just got to come into trust in the Lord. But it's hard to trust the Lord when you're still in states of believing it's you doing it all. I'm the doer. I created this life I have. I've got this wealth. I've got this wife and these children. I did it all. And it wasn't. And when you're in that ego, you can't have peace. But when you realise that the Lord is the doer and you're just an extension of his arm and hand, you can be at peace.
But it's a gift. The peace of heaven is a gift that when you feel it, it is beyond human understanding. It can be right smack in the middle of it. Everybody picking on you and things are going bad, and then you ask for it and you're given it, and somehow it's just marvellous. It's just great. So, and the Christians, they all know what it is.
Yes.
But the people who want to find fault with everybody, they've got no idea what they're talking about.
They're desperately looking for it. They don't know how to find it.
They reckon someone stole it off them. And if they can just find that right person, kick them up to behind.
Who could that someone be? Steal from ourselves. Go on, Darren.
It's crazy, isn't it? The old ideas in AA, some of the literature, it talks about our old ideas availed us nothing. We sit at the turning point. We ask God for his care and protection through every. That is it's powerful stuff. But the insane mind, trying to teach the insane mind how to get out of the problem is, that's what we're talking about, isn't it? And then so it comes to a point where we have to hit that rock bottom and say, I don't know. I'm insane. The whole thing is crazy. And then there was.
See, in AA they said that insanity. Well, there was this priest. Did you ever Father Jerry Nicola? Did you ever hear it?
Yeah, I heard of him.
What a great. He said, if you don't think alcoholics are insane, what about a bloke who gets up in the middle of the night, goes to the toilet, doesn't go anywhere, just lifts the cistern lid, pulls out a bottle of whiskey, has a few slugs of it, puts it back, goes back to bed. If that's not insanity, what is?
Look, it's very. Alcoholism is a very good example, very graphic external example of insanity. But look, I love the way the writings don't. They just don't. They just shoot straight. Swinburne says, selfishness is insanity.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Well, it is.
We're all connected. And as soon as we start loving each other and selfishness is insanity.
It is true that Bill Wilson's wife was a Swedenborgian.
Yeah, I think so, apparently.
Lois
So.
Burnham. Lois Burnham.
Oh,
Her surname was Burnham.
right.
The amazing part about it is that alcohol was a symptom of the problem.
Yes,
It wasn't the problem. It was a symptom of the problem.
Nicely put.
And that's where it can get distorted that alcohol was the problem, but alcohol wasn't really the problem. It was the problem. It was part of the problem. It was a big part of the problem because that was the anaesthetic that was used to get away from all this other stuff.
Now, here's this mystery that's just happening at the moment. I've been shooting myself up twice a day with this drug called Byetta or Exenatide. Now, I can't eat much because it'll make but
This is the diabetic one.
yeah, this is this diabetic one that's stopping me from getting Parkinson's.
Yes.
I now realise that all my adult life, I had a sort of a deep disturbance, and that if I overate, it would block it. And so therefore I convinced myself that it was hunger, but it wasn't. It was that when I overate and I felt satiated, I felt better. But also moderate doses of alcohol had exactly the same effect.
Yes.
So I think I wouldn't be surprised to find that this drug might even, I haven't drunk any alcohol since about 1978, so because I can't, it's too dangerous.
Yeah, right.
And so I'm not going to test it out, thanks.
You shouldn't be surprised if it took away people's appetite for
Well, for alcohol, there's something funny going on here. See, every alcoholic I've ever met, they've all been sensitive people, easily sort of, who pick up stuff from who pick up sort of world suffering. They find that the world is difficult, so I can remember being in the private bar of the Regatta pub, lining up 5 beers and saying, right, you bastards in the outside world, cop that. Cop that. Cop that. Oh, cop that.
And did the outside world have any effect?
No,
Did
it
have
didn't
any
seem
effect
to
on
change
that?
much.
They just kept filling the cups up for him and saying, happy hour's over soon, you better hurry.
But there was a funny... but it did seem to muck up the clock in the public bar because you'd be downing a few, and the clock would seem to go... 2 hours would go past, I'd have to ring up my wife and tell lies about where I'd been.
Oh no.
So
It's unforgiveness, like unforgiveness is, I'm going to hold a grudge at you. I'm going to poison myself and get back at you. It's unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is poison toxify my whole system.
That's right.
And somehow it's going to cause you some
That's right, yeah.
unforgiveness.
That makes sense.
Sounds like holding my breath until my face turns blue.
Yeah, and you'll be sorry.
Go on, Darren, read us that last paragraph and we'll close.
Forsaketh not. forsaketh not all that he had.
Yes.
The process of letting go of ownership over victories in spiritual battles.
Right.
For the subject in this quotation is the temptations undergone by those who belong to the church and are here called the Lord's disciples. Those temptations are meant by his own cross, which each of them has to carry, and the truth that they do not in any way conquer of themselves and from what is their own, but from the Lord, is meant by he who does not renounce all that is his own and cannot be my disciple.
Right.
Secrets of Heaven 459.
Beautiful. So we need to take up our cross, which means we need to put our ego to death. But we also need to forsake all we have and follow the Lord, which means we need, even as we do these processes and we engage in these processes, we sit down and we consult and we realise this is going to be tough, but I'm prepared to do it. We take up our cross. We must also remind ourselves real victory came from the Lord, not from self. There was nothing in me that actually gave me the victory.
Well,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
the battle is the Lord's. Last Wednesday.
What do you think, Juan? We'll close in prayer now, but you haven't said anything yet. What do you think?
The battle is the Lord. You see, in our group, someone read the paper. And we all agreed, because we have all saying that when you talk to someone around you about something related to God, they are blind. They don't see.
I don't see it.
Like the author said, for some truth, I can see it clearly without opening my eye. But for some other people around me, you cannot see. They refuse to see. They refuse to think about it. They think you are stupid.
Yes.
Why do you talk this thing to me?
Yes.
I think that is a battle. And that is not a battle, because they don't think that's a battle. In their mind, it's nothing.
Yes.
In our mind, it's a real battle. It's so important.
Yes.
It's related to life, death.
Yes, everything.
In their mind, nothing. I don't care. It's hopeless.
Yes.
Can I sing you a little song that's just when you're in love with God, they think you're just a fool. They got their own ideas, they're making up the rules. I know it's just not right, but I don't want to fight with them. They say God didn't make us. They say we're not created. Instead that we created him. They think that they're so clever. They're going to live forever. And they're going to do it all without him. Anyway, that's just a couple of verses. That's just one of my songs, just about what you were saying.
Well, one last thought, and that is that with people that just can't see the truth, even in them, the cognitive dissonance is not letting them see the truth, because that would force them to go into spiritual battles. So in a sense, in some ways, it's the Lord's mercy. They're just not seeing it. And they won't see it until the time's right. And we pray that it's while they're still alive on earth, but there is a short time in the spiritual world where they can process this and still. Let's pray. So I hope that you've all got something more out of that, that we've taken this time to sit and to consult and say, Lord, we know that spiritual battles are tough and that they're hard, but we would rather be those who are awake. We don't want to roll back over and go to sleep, Lord. We want to be those that are awake, even though there will be some discomfort. We hold fast, knowing that a short bit of suffering for eternal good is worth it, and we fortify our hearts and minds by those truths.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Darren. Great stuff.
Father Jerry. I was talking to a guy, and he mentioned him this morning. Yes. Yeah, and there's a guy
I don't.